taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taking things out of context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
In the context.
We have more context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
That is so out of context.
Out of context.
You're taking it out of context.
Now, hey, hold on. So we're going to flesh this out because I don't want nobody saying we don't take things in context.
Clipped me out of context.
It was out of context.
It's hard for your words to be taken out of context.
The full context.
In a modern day context.
Tell me the context.
Another important reminder as to why context is so important. So,
the last few days, Gypsy Rose Blanchard has been all over the comments section of a few different content creators. However, Becca Scoops was able to capture a couple of these comments in their entirety before she was able to delete them and then re-block said content creator, making them all disappear. After 2 years, this is exactly the kind of behavior that Gypsy Rose Blanchard does. This is why nobody is shocked or surprised by anything she says or does anymore. But let's get into it. I was just responding to one of your commenters that said something to the fact regarding documents in Becca Scoops, to which I simply am saying that I want all of the case file and all of the evidence to be released because right now people only have a portion of it and there is a big portion that is missing. So when I tell the truth about something, I was asked and it pertains to Nick. I'm called a liar because those documents have not been released yet. So that is why I made the comment, because for me, if I was curious about a case, which I'm not really into true crime, but you are because you tried to take your mom's life twice before and then you successfully did it. And, you orchestrated that whole thing for like 4.5 years. So you must have been into it for a minute there. Plus, the whole like cosplaying and role playing and the vampire and the weird, our fantasies and stuff. Yeah, you were into some really true crime type of behavior. Certainly with this whole fake narrative that helped get your ass out of prison. I mean, there's that. But I would want to know all of the evidence, every single page of the case file before I judge someone. Because again, we only see the most damning evidence against me. This is over 4,000 Facebook messages between Nick and I that have not been seen. Oh, yeah, and the ChristianForFree.com, the dating website, where you found him, where you sought him out, where you made a relationship with him exclusive after only 4 days. I think that if that evidence was to be released, then people would be able to reference that back to what I say, and therefore give me a little bit more credibility. You mean you're just worried about having credibility and not it being the truth, like saying that this right here can help verify that I am telling the truth? It's no, I need more credibility. That's some odd wording there. Because right now, Nick's side is being withheld, which, in my opinion, is a pretty critical part of the case file. No, then why didn't your dad and your stepmom get every single paper that was in your mother's house and put it in a storage facility for you to have? You are a full-blown, middle-aged woman who has every capability for the last 2 years of going through all of that stuff and reading it. Plus, you're sitting on over 10,000 plus pages of medical documents, which could also give you more credibility, right? But no, nobody's releasing them all. At this point, it can't look any worse on me, but what it can do is give credibility to the claims that I have been saying all along. And again, this has nothing to do with the medical side of things. These are the things that involve him and the dynamics of his and my relationship that people have not seen yet. That is why I even brought him up. So hopefully soon, one of these content creators will be able to request records and get the full case file. Will be out in the open. I signed paperwork I didn't read. And yes, I was an adult by that age, she means. But lack of the knowledge and maturity of an adult. So are you saying that you did have a cognitive impairment there going on? I had more knowledge in some areas And other areas I lack the knowledge to know I needed to react is to understand the implications and importance of a consent form. Oh, no, medical professionals are very thorough that you understand that. In fact, there's a whole entire clause about if you cannot understand that. She also had said this. This is definitely one of the questions that has played in my mind. I love my family. I will never turn my back on my family. Really? Did you turn your back on your mom? Because you certainly did. Because your dad is just as guilty for neglect as you say your mom is for abuse. But, you know, hey, he gets a free pass, right? I love my family. I'll never turn my back on them. But if you want to answer, the answer is Christy told me that when she reached out to attorneys that had never called her back, and yes, you are correct, in an interview, she said that the attorneys wouldn't touch the case, which is the truth. I do not know because I am not Christy to answer that question. All I know is what was told and what she said in an interview. As for my family bringing the media to me, the answer is the documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest was already being filmed when I was still incarcerated in Greene County Jail. Aaron Lee Carr was already making the documentary whether I participated or not. But I was given the opportunity to share my side. Then, once I went to prison, Christy was approached by Francesca Macelli. You botched that. Francesca Macelli, right? Which, that altogether has a long history. Her name is Fancy now, and she made false claims and that she's a producer. And so Christy brought Fancy into our lives. After that went south, who created the act. By then, I already met Melissa Moore, who had connections with Lifetime. Melissa wanted to do an updated documentary, to which I agreed to. Season 1 of Life After Lockup was a continuation of the prison confessions. Then we were picked up for a season 2. So it's honestly a little bit of both. I had producers and journalists contacted me directly while in prison, and they would contact Christy, and she would do some interviews. But you are correct. I had just chosen to live a quiet life. Things would be very different. Then there was the whole comment about the swallow test and the iodine and all of that stuff. But remember this? Remember when she said this a whole year and a half ago? I'm not speaking on shit from nearly a decade and a half ago. I have moved on from that chapter in my life and have matured from that manipulation waste dump of an old story. But now she wants everybody to have every page of everything, which they are not going to ever release because they don't ever approve anybody to have all of everything. Even if you get it and paid the thousands of dollars for everything, they're not going to give all that. Also, you should have had all of that when they were doing the documentary. Because if you were doing a fair and unbiased documentary that wasn't all just one-sided pro-Gypsy, they would have gotten everything like those messages to prove her credibility and her claims were true, right? But they didn't do that verifying and corroborating. They didn't do that due diligence. Remember when Gypsy said this? Also, I was only saying what he made me say. Not true. Not true. Because in that video where she says she's going to offer up her 13-year-old child, the video before that and the video before that is not him making her do that. That is her cosplaying, acting like she's appeasing him. But that's not what it says. Go back and read the whole thing. And then a couple of the videos say will not play, or not pertaining to the homicide. So there was those. Then she goes on to say, he is where he belongs. With thoughts like that, he was heading to prison with or without my involvement. So that is your justification for what you... what was it she said? Oh, I didn't manipulate him. I unintentionally manipulated him. Doesn't matter. Because without your involvement, he wouldn't have done it. And without him, you would have found somebody else. And even if you hadn't found somebody else, it still doesn't justify how 4.5 years earlier, you tried to take your mom's life twice and failed. Also lying to the public when she had her tonsils removed. What is all of that? Food. Same exact thing. Her mother also had her tonsils taken out when she was a kid, which was not uncommon. She wasn't mature and she didn't know nothing. She was just a little baby, but yet she knew to send Dan Glidewell all kinds of inappropriate materials while simultaneously still acting like a child. She's got nothing wrong with her, but look at all them bracelets. Look at all of those medical bracelets. I gave birth 5 times and I ain't never had no bracelets like that. And I've had cancer. I have a rare genetic connective tissue disease. All those surgeries she had. Yet you take them away and what do you find? A muscle biopsy, which is a test. Unfortunately, they have to make an incision for that test to obtain the biopsy of the muscle. Feeding tube scar, these two from a singular surgery. Sleep study. Oops, I got cut off. Oh, that's an albuterol breathing treatment for, people that have asthma, which is in her medical records. And if you don't know, Fancy Miss Ellie from the Good Wives Network has put out 204 pages of her medical records like over a year ago, plus a master chart, another master chart, 19-page micro deletion. She also just released another 84 pages from 2013, although her friends say she's got over 10,000 pages and she's not going to show them to anybody, but that it proves what Gypsy Rose Blanchard says, but yet they haven't released all of them. That's besides the point. From what Gypsy Rose Blanchard herself has shown us and said and has misrepresented, has been dishonest and misrepresented these pictures and documentaries into the public. That, all these surgeries, all this anesthesia, that is an albuterol breathing treatment. They even give those to people who don't have asthma. Same as this. What is that? That's a whole lot of food. Look at all of those plates and bowls. This is a sleep study. Now, we know that Gypsy Rose Blanchard has a very complicated medical history. She has said that many times herself, even while she was pregnant, getting a DNA test in her own TV show, that she has a complicated medical history. From the very time that she was born. Her mother even had her tonsils removed. They tried to use this picture in a documentary to try to fool and manipulate, gaslight an audience into believing that factitious disorder, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, can not only be a learned behavior instead of the psychological compulsive disorder that it is of an individual, but that this can be a learned behavior and that it can be genetic. In fact, Gypsy Rose's prison emails show that she gave this idea to Melissa G. Moore to, we should talk about my grandmother and show how my mom was just doing exactly what she was doing. That is not how factitious disorder works. Even Dr. Mark Feldman, who is a self-proclaimed expert on Munchausen and Munchausen syndrome by proxy, on factitious disorder, which is what the FBI are classifying it as. Even Dr. John Matthias has said that according to the DSM-5, which is the criteria to diagnose, that Dee Dee Blanchard does not fit the criteria. Malingering, maybe. She tried to put mole, and then when I took all of those away, we're left with this. Muscle biopsy. Muscle biopsy, unfortunately, is a test. It is a test to obtain a sample of the muscle to then test it to look for certain diseases like muscular dystrophy. Unfortunately, it leaves an incision, which will become a scar because that is how they must obtain the muscle. Then she's got the feeding tube scar, which could have been for not only swallowing issues that she was really having, her deformed palate, and teeth issues that she had, the swallowing issues, the saliva issues, the hypersalivation, all of that. It could have been for multiple reasons. She had GERD. She had severe acid reflux. She admitted that to Cal Lowry that she had severe acid reflux. And then we see 2 more up at the top from a single surgery where she had 2 submandibular glands removed. And we have a few large glands, and we have almost 1,000 or a couple hundred minor glands. So she had 1 surgery to have 2 removed from there. But it did not just start with, she put numbing cream on my mouth and we went right into surgery and they removed it. No, she had oral medication. She had physical therapy, another oral medication. Then they did Botox injections of these glands for 2.5 years before they ever had that surgery. Again, in her medical records. I have more scars from surgeries on my body than this picture shows. And unfortunately, with the feeding tube, yes, that's going to leave a scar as well. I had a radical hysterectomy, a total pelvic lymphadenectomy. I had a part of my vagina removed because I had stage 2/stage 3 cervical cancer over 5 years ago. I also had a transvaginal pelvic mesh sling done, and I have 3 incisions just from that alone. I also have a 17-inch hip to hip from where I had my radical hysterectomy. I also had two surgeries just in July, in the middle and the end of July, where I had a nerve stimulator placed in my spine and the battery. So I have 3 incisions from that. So I have literally over a dozen in surgical incisions on my body. I also had hand surgery where I had to have a huge cyst removed from my hand, not even 4 years ago. So if I was to do a diagram like that, you would see probably 11, 12 just on the front side and another 3 on my spine and my back and my butt. But let's talk about it. Gypsy Rose Blanchard didn't know her age. She admitted many times that she knew her age. She was telling people her age. Her dad even called her on her 18th birthday. They never used candles or numbered candles. Never got cards, balloons, anything that had the number on it. Yeah, not true. Oh, sorry, that's Dee Dee. That's Dee Dee, not Gypsy. Oh, sorry, that's Dee Dee's brother, not Gypsy. But the family didn't do that though, right? What's that? Is that her 8th birthday with the 8 candle on it? What? Another birthday? Oh my goodness, that's so crazy. She had no idea how old she was. And of course, the Good Wives Network recently put out another 84 medical documents. And you see here that this is a durable power of attorney for healthcare for Gypsy Rose Blanchard, where you can see as an adult, she does sign it. And what was it that she was just saying about iodine? And then up here it says allergy, milk, iodine. And they had been tracking her head circumference because she was born with microcephaly, strabismus, sleep apnea, failure to thrive, growth charts, and she didn't know her age. She's signing off on those forms as an adult in 2013, and you're telling me she didn't even know any of her age? Yeah, okay. She would have had to have known her age when they sat her down and told her that she's an adult and that she can do this, this, and this, and that she has to sign this and this and this as an adult. So at least at the age of 18, she had to have known she was 18. And then there's also this. So first, of course, I would take my child to the doctor if she had a symptom. Now, with that said, the symptoms I was having was real. That would be a good point. However, the symptoms were false. The removal of my salivary glands, for example, my mother was creating the symptom by putting numbing cream. No, you said Oragel, not numbing cream like lidocaine. And that's not what happened. The medical records show that. I have done several videos over a year and a half ago that are still on my TikTok where I showed the medical records, and they show over 2.5 years of all this stuff that she was saying. Patient reported that she was drooling, that she was waking up in the middle of the night. I'm assuming that's why they were doing the swallow tests and why they were admitting her into the hospital to find out what was happening, what was going on. And there had been 2 different times where Gypsy Rose Blanchard was malingering in her own medical records because she was lying on a hearing test. And they also said the same thing when another doctor had told Dee Dee to get out of the room because he wanted to make Gypsy stand because he knew she was walking. Her muscles and her thighs never atrophied, or her calves. And she stood up right in front of him and still tried to tell him that she had no sensation from her waist down. He wrote that there is a good possibility of Munchausen by proxy, or some other underlying etiology, which Munchausen syndrome could be. Okay, so to answer your question, no, the doctor that performed the surgery did not test to make sure that it was accurate diagnosis. So I can sue that doctor based on that alone. And he could sue you for defamation because the medical records show otherwise. So that knocks that surgery off as necessary. Yeah, it was necessary. Now let's move on to other things. I remember testing my kidneys as a young child. My mother would always come into the restroom for when they needed a urine specimen. I remember my mother bringing a safety pin that was pinned to her shirt, and after I would pee in the cup, she would prick her finger and drop a few drops of blood in my urine and claimed I had blood in my urine due to issues. Move on to other things. Okay. Issues with my kidney. Okay, again, this is another example of her making false symptoms. How come you've never mentioned that till now? Never. Never. And where's the medical records that show that you had blood in your urine? Both examples, she did something to intervene to create the problem for a diagnosis again. Now we can remove that as necessary. The feeding tube wasn't in place until age 8, I believe. So before the age of 8, I was eating crab and gumbo. No, you weren't. You said you didn't like it. Fries and nuggets from McDonald's. Acid reflux. Oh, this whole thing is bullshit. It's just bullshit. On July 22nd of 2015, a little over a month and 2 weeks after the crime happened, Christy Blanchard, the stepmother of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, was interviewed via phone with the sheriff's department, and she said this. Christy said Gypsy was very smart. Don't let her fool you. Let me repeat that for you. Not even a month and a half after the crime, Christy, Gypsy's stepmother, says to law enforcement officials via the phone that Gypsy is very smart and don't let her fool you. I can't imagine why she would say something like that. Can you? Let me jump in on this one. Her mom brainwashed her and treated her like a baby and put it in Gypsy's head that she's younger than what she was. Her mom literally lied about her age. Her mom told her she needed the medicine. You mean the medicine that was never in her system? You mean the medicine that was full stock just in case there's another natural disaster in a locked closet that clearly was full, brand new from the pharmacy, never opened, not taken? But you know damn good and well that Gypsy ran off with all that good shit. You know, the habit-forming shit. And I'm sorry, but I cannot believe after 2 years there are people that are still buying this. You see this form right here? Gypsy Rose Blanchard with an E. Gypsy Rose Blanchard without the E at the end of Blanchard. See those alternate dates of birth? July 27th is really her birthday, but she was born in 1991. You see how it says 1993, 1992? If her mama was genuinely rolling back her age, why in the hell would she sign off on a medical release form for medical records for Gypsy Rose and give them those alternate spellings and dates of birth? Nobody that truly has Munchausen syndrome by proxy is going to do that, because that right there will find them out. That is like shooting your own foot. That is like telling on yourself. Don't forget that in 2007, Gypsy was 16 and she knew she was 16. Also, don't forget that when she was 18, all the way to 24, she was signing her own consent forms, and it is all over her medical records. She knew her real age. There's no way that you can be smart enough to orchestrate a whole murder, dumb enough to get caught, and then sit there and say that you're dumb enough to not realize your own age. Especially when you have hundreds of pictures of you with your half-siblings growing up, having visits. And then there's also this. Remember how she said that her mother and her family didn't use numbered candles? Well, that's a bold-faced lie, because Uncle Evans is right here using numbered candles. Oh, but they didn't do this in this family, right? So she didn't know her age. This is one of the most egregious lies of Gypsy Rose Blanchard playing right in your motherfucking face. And to even see what she has said and how preposterous it even is. But this family didn't do that, right? Well, slap my ass and call me pretty, because I think that's Dee Dee's birthday cake right there, and it has a number 3 on it. She didn't know her age. You want to stand by that? You want to stand by that lie? She did not know her age. Are you sure about that? Are you absolutely positive that that's what you want to believe? Absolutely sure that that's not a number 8 right there? The same way she lied about having seizures and being perfectly healthy and having nothing wrong with her, although she has microcephaly, strabismus, sleep apnea, asthma, GERD, severe acid reflux. a very rare chromosome disorder, a microdeletion of a chromosome, scoliosis, eye issues, hypersalivation. Until the age of 24, she also had tubes in her ears twice. She had dental rehab multiple different times where they saved 15 of her teeth. She also had a lot of skin issues, lots of discoloration, rashes, and even tretinoin for acne. Same girl that lied to everybody after she had her own daughter and said that her mom never got tested for the chromosome disorder, so it must have came from her, and that her dad recently got tested and it didn't come from him. Her mother did get tested years ago. So when you can easily verify and fact check some of these little lies, then it begs the question, is she going to lie about something bigger, like her whole story? Because it's a pretty big incentive to get off of the DP or life in prison with a really well-sold story. In fact, I have seen cases where people have taken lives for simply their addiction, for simply taking $100, and you think spending the rest of your life in prison or being sentenced to DP is not a big enough incentive for somebody to lie and come up with a creative story to get themselves, to barter themselves a plea deal. Dee Dee may have been many things, but you know what she wasn't? She wasn't a life taker. Same girl who orchestrated a whole entire felony crime, a very heinous crime, for over 2.5 years with an autistic man that she manipulated that whole time, almost 1,000 days, into helping her. Even offering up her own 13-year-old daughter for him to have his way with. This isn't him speaking. This isn't him instructing her to speak. This is her speaking, making all of this up. Because that's what she did. That was her modus operandi. That's how she took him on an emotional roller coaster that he was not cognitive enough to understand what was happening to him or what she was doing or the motive behind it. But you know what brought me to paying attention to these little details? Not the fact that I've known about the whole case since it happened, watched every documentary when it happened in 2007, in 2008, even the act in 2019. I've watched the Gypsy Rose Blanchard agenda play out in the last 10 years. And I paid attention when I seen this trial. This is from Nicholas Godejohn's trial. There was a whole lot of lies in this trial, but you know what you need to pay attention to? How much was omitted. Because if you're willing to say that somebody SA'd you in the most egregious way that is possible, when that did not happen, it was consensual. It was 100% consensual. And then on documentaries and series go ahead and try to say the same exact narrative that you had to testify under oath to not being true. Admitting right here that it was consensual. Do you really believe if she's willing to lie about something so big, like taking her mother's life or trying to throw the book and falsely accusing a man, an autistic man of SA, that she's not going to lie about some little shit like knowing her age and taking medications that she clearly was not taking? Why would she do that, you ask? I don't know. This is the $1 billion incentive right here. Not to mention, since she's got out of prison with what she got from the act and the trust fund and the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, plus her books, plus her TV show, season 1 and season 2, afterward, all of the appearances, it was estimated to be at least $485,000. That's a pretty big incentive to keep going with this story too. And yeah, nobody owns Gypsy's life rights, but those life rights to that story has to be told 100%. Honestly. And it also doesn't include the life rights to Dee Dee and her story and her life, or Nicholas Godejohn, his story and his life. So if she wants to keep throwing them two under the bus, people are going to continuously talk about her crime. Because remember, she tried to take her mama's life in the early spring of 2011, and again on June 14th of 2011. She didn't meet Nicholas until October of 2012. She found him, she sought him, she messaged him. She is the one that curated a relationship with him She's the one that made their relationship exclusive after only 4 days. They might have been talking about it a year before it actually happened, but you know, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, she had that crime on her mind going back 4.5 years. Because her first attempt and her second attempt, which by the way are crimes in and of themselves that she was not charged with, and they didn't take that into consideration with this mitigating circumstances. Oh, and they were biasing a potential jury pool. But sure, believe the girl that had an 8 on her 8th birthday. Didn't know her age. The girl who told Dr. Phil that she lost all of her teeth because of Tegretol, when there was no Tegretol in her system. Same girl that on the night of the crime told Nicholas that her mother took her sleep aid pill. Turns out the results are in. Greene County Medical Examiner's Office. Right here. What's that? What's that? That's the toxicology report for Dee Dee Blanchard. Negative for absolutely everything. So why would she lie to Nick and tell him that her mother was in a deep sleep by taking her sleep medicine? I'll tell you why. Because Little Miss Psychopath wanted her mother to feel every single jab. And she wanted Nick to think that she was in a deep sleep while he was doing it. And when I noticed that over 2 years ago, it was all because of her own documentary and series. October 12th of 2023 was the day I made my first video on TikTok about this case and the lies. Because if you're going to lie about something that big, of course you're lying about everything else.
Gypsy Rose, the princess with power. Her knife launches over 2 feet, and when trouble strikes,
she can walk.
Swap her wig, rule the day, and if things get tricky,
one get out of jail free.